National Election Authority on Monday declared President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi as winner of the 2024 presidential elections after securing 89.6% of the valid votes. Addressing a press conference to announce the final results of the elections held between the 10th till the 12th of December, Hazem Badawi, head of the National Election Authority, said the presidential elections witnessed unprecedented turnout by 66.8% of Egypt's 67 million eligible voters. Councillor Badawi said that no breaches were reported during the voting in the presidential elections. Also, Hazem Badawi, the head of the National Election Authority, said that the voting took place with complete judicial supervision, while the NEA allowed observers to observe the polling stations, the voting process, the counting of the vote during all the voting process and the counting process, while the 67,003,400 voters were eligible to cast their ballot. The turnout was unprecedented, according to Councillor Badawi, in the Egyptian history. He announced the result for the elections with the turnout, which is the highest in the Egyptian history, as announced by Councillor Badawi. Also, we have to mention here that the presidential elections were Abdel Fattah el-Sisi with 89.6%, Hazem was 4.5%, Farid Zahran was 4%, and Abdel Sanad Yamama was 1.9% of the vote. And to shed more light on this, we are delighted to be joined by our correspondent from the announcement of the NEA press conference, Ahmed Nader. Ahmed, good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much. Cairo International Convention Center in Medina or in North City. As you've mentioned, I witnessed the announcement of the National Election Authority of the results of the first round of the presidential election. As you mentioned, between four different presidential candidates, being the President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi, Farid Zahran, Omar, and head of al-Wafd Party Abdel Sanad Yamama. As the first round of vote was concluded between the 10th and the 12th of December, and as announced by the National Election Authority, that was the presidential election in the history of Egypt, and it determined you announced the result the president for the upcoming 6 years here in the country. The announcement began with the speech made by Councillor Ahmed al-Nari, the head of the executive authority of the election authority, who said that it was a historic day for democracy and for the Egyptians in terms of awareness to be specific and as we have seen they unveiled the result of the presidential election. Especially the report that was observed from the Egyptian expatriates, the Egyptians living outside of Egypt, as we have seen the presidential elections being concluded at the beginning of the month, and for the citizens living within the country. The National Election Authority, according to Councillor Bindari, did portray the value of democracy for Egypt with the highest of standards. We also thank the members of the judicial authorities and the National Election Authority to have such a fantastic dialogue regarding and we also thank the different entities like the Ministries of Defense, Ministers of Interior, Finance, Development, Transportation, Health, the Youth and Sports, as the Minister of Youth and Sports, Dr. Ashraf Shokri, was here as well, the governors and the head of the different regions, as well as the foreign media outlets that observed the national or the presidential elections over the past month, for portraying the electoral scene as it happened with transparency for the rest of the world. Councillor Bindari also thanked Egyptian people for practicing their constitutional right participating in the presidential elections. On the other hand, the speech made by heads of the National Election Authority, Councillor Hazem Badawi, who later on announced the results of the presidential election, he said that the people had their say through the polling stations inside Egypt and outside of Egypt as well. He congratulated the Egyptians, especially that all the sectors of the society went out to participate and have their say in the constitutional scene in the elections through, as he mentioned, a lot of women participated, a lot of the elderly people participated as well, and the youth from within Egypt and for outside of Egypt as well. He mentioned a very important point regarding the presidential elections, is that there were no breaches, no violations whatsoever in the presidential elections, although it witnessed the highest turnout in the history of Egypt in terms of the presidential elections. Councillor Badawi also commended the presidential candidates, 4 different presidential candidates, as they unveiled their programs early on for the Egyptian citizens, for the Egyptian expatriates to choose freely between them with no problems whatsoever during the election. Councillor Badawi also thanked the judges and the members of the judicial authorities and the Ministry of Interior, to be specific, as they guarded the presidential elections and the polling stations, as we have seen here in the country for over the 3 days. He said that the real winner here is the homeland. The real winner here is Egypt and the Egyptians, and he sent congratulations to the media outlets as well who observed the process for everyone with transparency, as he mentioned that there is nothing to hide. Mahisti, of course, as I listened, you mentioned the results of the presidential elections, but he, Councillor Hazem Badawi, he mentioned them with more specificity, as he said that the number of eligible voters were 67 million and 32,437 Egyptians for the expatriates and for the Egyptians living within Egypt. And the number of voters who went and had their say in the polling stations were 44,777,776 different Egyptians, with a participation turnout or percentage of 60% and 8 of tenths of percent. And the number of accepted voters were 44,288,361, with a percentage of 98.9%, as the number of the null or the void votes were 498,307, with a percentage reaching only 1.1%. The number of votes, as you mentioned, Mahisti, for the winner, President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, were 39,702,431, with a percentage of 89.6%. Of course, the overwhelming majority of votes for President al-Sisi. As for who came second, Hazem Omar, with 1,986,352, with a percentage of 4.5%. Farid Zahran came third with 1,767,952, with a percentage of 4%. And finally, Abdel Sanad Yamama with 822,606, with a percentage of 1.9%. As, of course, Councillor Hazem Badawi announced the decision number 39 for the year 2023 by the National Election Authority, a majority win for President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi as the president for Egypt for the upcoming 6 years, beginning from the next year. As for the others, he mentioned that the other candidates won respect, and they have made it clear that there was a democratic process here in Egypt. Mahisti.
Indeed, Ahmed, thank you so much for this very important coverage and wrap-up for the announcement of the National Election Authority, who declared President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi the president for the Arab Republic of Egypt with actually 39,702,451 voters, which is 89.6% of the eligible voters. And indeed, Councillor Hazem Badawi, the head of the National Election Authority, announced that it was an unprecedented turnout in the history of Egypt in the elections, which was quite high. And we have to mention here that indeed the president of the Arab Republic of Egypt for the next 6 years, Abdel Fattah el-Sisi, did gain 39,702,451, while the other candidate, Hazem Omar, won 4.5% of the vote, Farid Zahran 4%, and Abdel Sanad Yamama 1.9% of the total voters. With that, our dear viewers, the name of the coming president of Egypt was announced by Councillor Hazem Badawi, who said that the election was conducted under full judicial supervision, and he actually thanked Egyptians for this very high turnout with no violations reported during the voting process. Our dear viewers will go to a short break, so stay tuned on ITV International.
يا مصر السلامة وسلاما يا بلادي إن رمى الدهر سهاما أتقيها بفؤادي واسلمي في كل حين. للعلا أبناء مصر للعلا وبمصر شرفوا المستقبلا وافدا لمصرنا الدنيا فلا نضع الأوطان إلا أولا. جانب الأيسر قلب الفؤاد وبلادي هي لقلب اليمين. لك يا مصر السلامة وسلاما يا بلادي إن رمى الدهر سهاما اتقيها بفؤادي واسلمي في كل حين.
تفوت عليك المحن ويمر بيك الزمان وانت اغلى وطن وانت اعلى مكان. تفوت عليك المحن ويمر بيك الزمان وانت اغلى وطن وانت اعلى مكان. ومهما كان كل خطوه بنص ومكان مصر يا مصر وكل خطوه بنص. قولوا معايا نعيش لمصر ونموت لمصر. مصر مصر يا مصر شامه وكرامه حبيبك سلامة وانت لعدوك نهاية. كلك شهامة وكرامة يا راية فوق كل راية. انت لحبيبك سلامة وانت لعدوك نهاية. ومهما كان انت مصر وكل خطوة بنصر. ومهما كان انت مصر
The National Authority on Monday declared President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi as winner of the 2024 presidential election after securing 89.6% of the valid votes. Head of Al-Wafd Party Abdel Sanad Yamama received 1.9% of the vote. Head of the Egyptian Democratic Party Farid Zahran received 4% of the vote, while head of the People's Republican Party Hazem Omar grabbed 4.5% of the votes. Addressing a press conference to announce the final results of the election between the 10th and 12th of December, Councillor Hazem Badawi, head of the National Assembly, said the presidential elections witnessed unprecedented turnout of 60.8% of Egypt's 67 million eligible voters. Councillor Badawi said that no breaches were reported during the voting in the presidential elections. Also, Badawi thanked all for the vote and for such a huge turnout, as was announced by Councillor Badawi, that was precedented in the history of Egypt. He said that the election was held under full judicial supervision, with the observers from different institutions, from the NGOs, Arab and foreign observers, were observing the voting process as well as the counting of the ballots. We have to remind here that 67,032,400 voters are eligible to vote in the presidential elections, and the turnout, as was announced by Councillor Badawi, was 66.8%. As the valid votes after the four candidates were announced, Abdel Fattah al-Sisi with 39,702,451 vote, which is representing 89.6% of the vote. Farid Zahran with 1,767,952, 4%. Hazem Omar with 1,986,352, which is 4.5%, and came fourth the head of Al-Wafd Abdel Sanad Yamama with 1.9% of the vote, which is 9,082 and 66 voters. Our dear viewers, every day for Egypt, as the election authority announced the name of the President of the Egypt for this year term, out for the elections announced by the head of the election authority, Councillor Hazem Badawi. The National Election Authority declared President Fattah al-Sisi of the 2024 presidential election, scoring 86% of the votes with 39,701 voters, and came Omar as 4.5% of the 4%, and came fourth with 1.9%. Again, we are joined with our correspondent Ahmed Nader. Ahmed, can you update us about the announcement of the National Election Authority about the presidential elections 2024, as you witnessed the press conference live?
Yes, as you mentioned, I was there from the beginning of the day, I think at about 1 p.m. I was immediately, of course, the speech is by Ali Ali. As in the previous after you heard the loud voice following the win of President al-Sisi with another for 6 years. That was the presidential campaign members of the campaign of President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, congratulating each other and taking photos and having a nice celebration of the winning the elections for 6 years. As you mentioned, the recent President al-Sisi, Hazem Omar, Abdel Sanad Yamama, and Farid Zahran, as the first round was concluded last week, I think on the 12th of December, or about 6 days ago, from the 10th and until the 12th of December. And as I mentioned, that this is the fifth presidential elections in the history of Egypt. Of course, confirmed President al-Sisi as the president of the country for the upcoming 6 years. But it was an historic turnout, as we have mentioned the statements made by the head of the National Election Authority, the NAA, Councillor Hazem Badawi, saying that this is the biggest amount and the biggest number of voters and participation in the history of the presidential elections here in the country.
Yes. Yes, Ahmed. Ahmed, how did you see the mood of the candidates and the representatives and everyone which witnessed the announcement of the results, Ahmed? And
Yes.
of course, we witnessed, as we were talking to you in the previous phone, the festive mood and the songs played in the background, Ahmed.
Yes, you have seen, Mahisli, of course, the footage and the photos and the videos coming from within the conference hall, the Cairo International Conference Center.
Yes.
In the middle of the hall, of course, we have seen tens of members of the presidential campaign of President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi.
Yes.
Whenever they heard the name of President al-Sisi being confirmed, or not even confirmed, we have seen the numbers being given out by the Councillor Hassan Badawi, the head of the National Election Authority, saying that about 44,777,776 Egyptians participated in the elections. Afterwards, we have seen Councillor Hassan Badawi saying that 39 million of them, 702,431 of the votes were given to President al-Sisi.
Yes.
Just right then, of course, the members of the presidential campaign, they knew that President al-Sisi won. We were just waiting for the confirmation at the end of the speech made by Councillor Hassan Badawi. But they knew that President al-Sisi had won. They celebrated, they cheered, they said that this is the proof that there was democracy, it was a democratic, it was a transparent process of the presidential elections, having four different candidates in the presidential elections. And we have seen Hazem Omar, who came second with about nearly 2 million votes. That's not bad as well for the Hazem Omar, the presidential candidate who came second in the presidential elections. Farid Zahran coming third with also more than 1.5 million, specifically with 1,767,952 votes. So that's not a bad percentage, as Councillor Hassan Badawi said at the end, that the other presidential candidates, they have won the respect of the Egyptians, they have won the respect of the world, and we have proven for the world that we have democracy, we have transparency, especially with the media outlets and the other organizations who came from the Arab League, from the European Union, from the African Union, from different entities, global entities, to be observing the elections.
Indeed, Ahmed Nader, our correspondent. Thank you so much, Ahmed, for updating us about the press conference which was announced by the National Election Authority's head, Councillor Hazem Badawi, who announced the results of the presidential elections 2024 and declaring President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi as winners of the 2020 presidential election after securing 13,102,151 of the valid votes, which is representing 86% of the vote, while head of El-Wati received 1% of the votes. Head of the Egyptian Social Democratic Party, Farid Zahran, received 4% of the vote, and head of the People's Party, Hazem Omar, came second, grabbing 4.5% of the vote. Addressing the press conference to announce the final results of the elections held between the 10th till the 12th of December, Councillor Hazem Badawi, head of the National Election Authority, said that the presidential elections witnessed an unprecedented turnout of 68% of Egypt's 67 million eligible voters. He also said that no breaches were reported during in the presidential elections. Our dear viewers will go to a short break, and after that we'll be back to continue our coverage.